And Joshua's leading the people, and he begins to pray, and he hears from God. And here's what God says. Joshua chapter 6, verse 1. Now they walk into the promised land, and right when they walk into the promised land, they see a problem. Because when you yield to God, and when he gives you a promise, you got to walk through a problem to get there. They see a problem, and the problem is Jericho, one of the toughest cities in history. Now, the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out, and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. But, Lord, they still in there, and we're out here. Because see, what Joshua saw was a 6-foot-high outer wall, a 50-foot-high inner wall, an impregnable fortress. The walls were so thick, they could race chariots side by side around them. He saw a massive problem, and God saw a promise. Because God doesn't deal in problems, he deals in promises. Some of us pray the problem, and we don't learn how to pray the promise. What you see and what God sees are two different things. And until you get on his wavelength and you start praying what he sees and saying what he sees and saying what he says, you'll never see what he sees. We got to start praying what God says about us in the word. Learn how to speak in faith. I remember whenever, I've told you this story before and I love this story, whenever Jaden was little, she's my oldest daughter, whenever she was little, she was like 7. And phones were a big deal, apparently. Still are. Your kids, they all want a phone, don't they? Resist for as long as you can. There's a reason Apple's telling you you're spending too much time on the screen, okay? I mean, if the creators of the product are like, you're using our product too much, there's a problem with the product. I'm just saying, just Google it. All right. When she was 7, she was like, hey, Dad, I need a phone. And I was like, you don't need a phone. Yes, I do, Dad. I need a phone. I need a phone. I want a pink phone. I was like, you're 7, you don't need a phone. She said, all the 7-year-olds have phones. I was like, if all the 7-year-olds jump off a building, you know, this is the whole thing your parents used to say. She never stopped asking me for a phone. She was incessant. She was determined. She understood that someday the Father would provide her with a means of communication. She knew that if she just kept asking, she would walk into the right season and time, and now she's in college, and the Father still pays for her connection and communication device. Why? Because she understood the power of asking, of seeking, of not letting go. What would happen if you would get a hold of that and say, God, I'm just gonna pray a little crazy prayer. I'm gonna pray a little crazy faith. This is, Joshua understands. Now listen, God gives these instructions. Y'all come play a little music, Richie. March around the city. Listen to this. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do it again. Do it for 6 days. Have 7 priests. Listen how specific God is. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. And when you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Y'all give a loud shout. Every campus, go. Then the wall of the city will collapse. Sometimes your victory is waiting on your praise. And sometimes we're waiting on a victory to give God praise. What if you shouted before the victory ever happened? What if you realize I've already won the battle because I'm on the right side? I read the back of the book and we win. God is able. Now this is crazy. He gives crazy instructions, and I love Joshua's response. Immediately, verse 6, so, everybody say so. That's a coordinating conjunction. Here's what that means. That means what's getting ready to happen is a direct result of what was just said. So, there's 0 time in between the word and the work. So, Joshua called the priests and said to them, and he gives them all the instructions that God gave to him. What would happen if instead of arguing with God, you just obeyed God? I wonder how many miracles God is waiting to give you. You just have to obey. God gives you, listen, we're a church of next steps. Everybody say next steps. Can I just want to challenge you. Give me a year. Give me 1 year. Everybody say 1 year. Just give me 1 year. Listen, we want you to do 4 things. We want you to know God. We do that on the weekends. We want you to find freedom. We do that in groups because you need somebody to come alongside you in your life. We have over 600 groups. Go to our website, ask anybody on the dream team, get in a group. We want you to discover your purpose. Everybody was created on purpose for a purpose. You have a purpose. Go through Growth Track today at all of our campuses. You can go in Growth Track, you can discover your purpose, and then 4, we want you to make a difference. You can jump on the dream team, serve, go on missions, help people, serve our city. It'll shock you what'll happen in 1 year if you'll just consistently do what God is putting in front of you. Even like you're saying, well, that sounds real simple. The battle plan sounded real simple, but it also sounded ridiculous. Like, can you imagine explaining that to fighting men? Okay, guys, here's what we're gonna do. It's gonna be amazing. I mean, it's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be awesome. Here's what we're gonna do. Okay, we're gonna need our swords. No, we're good. We're the flaming arrows. We're gonna need to scale the walls. No. Shh, be quiet. Stop talking. We're gonna march around the city. And then we're gonna go back home. Okay? Like, we're gonna, like a bunch of chants and jeers and talking a bunch of smack. No. We're not gonna say anything. Do you realize that God never commanded the people to be quiet? Joshua did. Because sometimes God won't silence the haters. He's allowing you to do that in your life. And if you surround yourself with the wrong people, you'll never walk where God called you to walk, because they will talk you out of something God's trying to walk you into. Get around the right people. Can I tell you this? God's promises don't have expiration dates. This is a 400-year-old promise that God's getting ready to make good on. And so they walk around the walls of the city for 6 days quietly, not saying anything. You got to know the first day was weird, right? It's just weird. Like, what do we do? Shh, can't say anything. Just walking. First day's got to be weird. Second day's got to be weird. But you got to know by the 3rd day, Jericho's freaking out. You got to know they're screaming at him, what are you guys doing? This is a great battle plan. By the 3rd day, the soldiers are walking with such confidence, 600,000 Jews walking around. You got to know that Jericho's freaking out. On the 6 days, they're like, do something. For the love of your Yahweh, do something. And on the 7th day, they don't just walk one time. They walk 7 times. I wonder if the walls didn't start shaking just a little bit and the people of the city begin to realize the power that's in front of them. Listen, your enemy knows that when you begin to obey what God has laid in front of you, he does not stand a chance. And on the 7th time around, they blew the trumpets. They shouted unto God with a voice of triumph, and the walls fell. I wonder what would happen if you shout before the victory is yours. You shout like God has already done it. You shout like God has already come through.